Hi, Adam.
Hello. Can you hear me just fine?
I can, yes.
Ah, good. Oh man. It's getting hotter now. I wasn't ready for that. I thought it was gonna be a lot colder.
Yeah.
I was wearing like a jacket and jeans and I walked outside and I was like, man, I gotta
Yep. It's wish it would stay about 70, 75 all summer, but
Oh, I don't think it's gonna be like that.
no luck. Yeah, it'll be 80s and 90s, unfortunately.
Oh yeah, unfortunate. I like the cold. I mean the heat is just very uncomfortable.
Yeah. Yeah, I prefer cold as well. I mean, I don't like it when it's, the 20s or whatever, but I could live with 50s, 60s all year.
Yeah. I have an SSD just sitting on my desk because I've been so lazy to install it.
Hey,
I don't
Chris,
know.
Nick,
Hello, hello.
Hello. Hello.
how are you doing?
I'm
I'm
doing
doing
good.
all right. I shaved my head because it's hot. No.
Yes, it is. It's getting hot.
I know. Kind of annoying.
Hey, Cody. All right. So, who do we have? Cody, Nick. So, Cody, you turned in, you got 6C going. Yeah, I think I remember seeing your name in the log file.
Yeah, I finished that one, yeah.
She's in the bathroom.
Okay.
I need to do it.
Matt, no, Steven, you did it. Oh, yeah, Steven was the flute, yeah. That wrote about 10,000 records to my log file. It's okay. You weren't the only one. Matthew also sent at least several dozen, several hundred.
It took me a while to figure out how to get it to go right, so I had to send a lot of messages.
Yeah, but I think let's see. Chris. Okay, who just signed in? Connor. How's it going, Connor?
Good.
And who else? Eric. Going all right, Eric? If you replied, you were muted, so I didn't hear you.
Okay.
All right. Well, I'll go ahead and get started. Once again, pretty much the same, most of the same faces or names that I see up here. Trying to think, everyone that's turned in the assignment. Yeah, I remember seeing their name in the log file, except one person. It's not
I have a question about that. Is it supposed to send the IP address that I'm using? Because I think that's what it did rather than what I entered in the program.
Yeah, so the log file or the server prints out the message that was sent and where it came from.
Okay,
So that will be your IP address, your public IP address, and the public port number that UDP assigned to the socket. That you can control that, but generally, if you don't specify a port number when you create the socket, it'll just create a use a random port number.
right.
So what you saw in the server output was the message from and then the IP address that it came from and the port that it came from. So not the port that you sent to or the IP address that you sent to. If it's getting there, if it's showing up, that means you sent it to the right place.
Oh, okay, I get it. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I don't. The reason I displayed it that way was
I should have tested it first on a different IP than sending it. And I was like, oh my gosh.
yeah, the reason I displayed it that way is when we were in class, I would have the server up on the whiteboard or on the projector, and everybody has a fixed IP address. And that way I'd know just by the IP address that it came from who sent the message, even if, the name gives it away too, usually, but the IP address tells me if somebody, put in some other name or whatever. Coming from a public, across the public internet, obviously the IP address doesn't mean anything. I mean, the best it tells me is who your ISP is.
Right.
If I were to look up who owns that IP address. Or
Right.
IP addresses.
Which is good information for a hacker too, as well.
Yeah, it's good information. If those were some kind of nefarious messages, the IP address would locate where it came from because the ISPs generally have a record of who owns, which of their customers own at any given time a particular IP address.
Right. And they have like blocks of them, I imagine. Yeah.
Okay, so let me share the screen. We can look at what we got going on this week. All right, so we're in week 11, and we've got finished module 4 up here, but I think we have finished it, so unnecessary to do that. And then, so we have basically just the threaded assignment, and then the Module 4 quiz and the Python Essentials Module 4 test for this week. So what I'm mostly going to go over is what you need to know to be able to take 6C and turn it into what is necessary for 6D. So what we're doing is we're going from getting all the input from the user to getting the input from a file. And so, you know, I just kind of threw this extra assignment in here just to introduce you to working with files in Python. And, you know, along the way, we do some list manipulation and so forth in order to extract the data. So, you know, we'll just go over what the assignment requires. I'm going to cover enough, I hope, for you to take what we covered today and integrate that into this next assignment. So the only thing that you're going to get from the user in this version of the program is the name of the file. Okay, could have left that hard-coded in there, but you know, still wanted you to make sure that you can use input statements properly. So, and that also, you know, gives the user an opportunity to exit the program without finishing it. All right, so that's the only user input that that this version is going to require. All right, then you're going to open the file that the person, you know, that you type in at the input statement. You're going to open it, and if there's an error, print a message and exit. Because if there's an error opening the file, well, a couple of things. You could alter the program somewhat. It's totally up to you. You know, this would be the simplest way to go about it, is just try to open it. If it doesn't work, quit, and then you run, you know, fix what, you know, find out what's wrong, and then run it again. Alternatively, you could continue prompting for a file until there's a successful open. You know, that allows for the user to typo the file name and not have to rerun the program to fix it. So either way, you know, if you want to do it that way, that is fine. Otherwise, just print a message and quit, and you'll have to, you know, figure out, you know, why didn't it open? Most likely it's incorrect file name. So after you've got it open, then you're going to read the contents of the file, and then you're going to process the contents of the file. And that's what most of the logic, comes in, is processing the file and getting the data that you want. The file looks like, if you've looked at, I've shown you several times now, what the file looks like. It's a comma separated value file, and it consists of an IP address, a port number, the name of the person sending the message, and the message itself. Okay, and then you're going to basically take that information and send a message for each line of, well, in the example that we go over today, you're going to send, the program is going to break it up into two messages. First sending the name as a message, then sending the message. In the program that you write in 6D, you're going to take the name and the message and put them together to make one send. Okay, so the other things that you need to do are the usual stuff. For each row of data, you're going to you'll validate the IP address in the port, just like you've been doing all along. So all that validation stuff is the same except that you don't go back and get a new address or port from the user anyway, if they are in some way invalid. What you will do is just skip to the next line of data to process and try it, you know, and just keep going like that. Okay, so let's take a look at any questions on what you're expected to do here before I go on and go over a sample, an example file that processes the input file.
What would you use as a skip, I guess? Just
What's that?
continue?
I'm sorry, what?
What would you use as skip? You're saying skip the line.
Oh, skip. Oh, okay. Basically, you just ignore it and then go. In other words, if you've got the processing of each line of the file of the input file in a loop of some sort, which you would, it'd probably be a for loop, you would just do a continue or something like that. You know, because if it's invalid, if the IP address or port are invalid numbers or not in the correct range or whatever, then you basically just continue and go to the top of your loop to process the next line of input.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, the other, one last requirement of this program is for you to keep track of how many valid lines of data in the file that you processed. So that just means you're going to have to initialize a counter before you start processing lines and increment that counter every time you have a successful, you know, every time you have a valid IP address and port number, and then print that out at the end. Okay, so, and if there's anything else that occurs to you, just let me know. Okay, so my sample program is going to do, mostly it's going to have all the information needed to open and process the data in the file. I don't have any of the other details in here, like validating the IP address and port number, or counting the number of valid lines. That's all stuff that I'm going to leave up to you in the final product. So all of this that we're going to go over today is just kind of the new stuff, you know, because you haven't, or at least this, there's this part right here that you see on the screen and like one or two other lines of code that are new, but I'm also going to go over the processing of the file because it's, you know, not something that we've really done. You know, it's basically working with lists, but there's a few little tricks to it that you probably would be helpful for us to go over before sending you out on your own to do it. Okay, so what I'm going to do is instead of running this program, I'm just going to copy and paste it into the console so that we can, you know, take a look at the contents of variables and so forth as we go. But I'll describe each thing first. So the first thing we've got here is a try command. And basically what you have is a try except code block. Whenever you use the try command, and I don't know if anyone here has used it, maybe.
I've used it.
You did, okay. And I know
used it
that somebody else did too, I can't remember.
Yeah, I used it a lot.
So you have to have both lines of code. You have to pair the try with an except. So what the try is kind of like what it sounds like. It basically says try to execute the following block of code without error. And so, but if there is an error, then go to the exception line. That's what the accept is. So whenever there's an error in code, like if this was, if the file didn't exist or something like that, or it existed, but somehow it couldn't be opened because maybe it was opened by another program or something and locked by that program, then the open would fail. And that would throw what's called an exception. And normally that would just mean your Python program blows up and you see all that, you know, yellow or red writing and, you know, some sort of error message. But if you use try except, then you are responsible for handling the error. And in this case, I'm just having you, you know, print an error message and quit the program. And like I said, you could put all this around a loop, and you know, since you're going to be getting the file from the user instead of having it right here. So in your program, you'll actually have a variable instead of a string, instead of the hard-coded string, because up above the try, you're going to get an input. You're going to do an input statement to get the name of the file. Okay, so that's going to, another difference between what I'm showing you here and what you'll do for the actual assignment. So, you know, if you wanted, you could put do a while loop around the input of the file and the try except block and keep getting a file until it's valid, until you know, were able to open it successfully. If you don't want to do that, then what you see here is sufficient. Other ways that you can open a file, here we're opening it. The R just means for read. So I couldn't change the contents of the file in my Python program. When I'm opening it in this method, I can only read the contents. If I opened it with the W, that means I could write to the file as well. And if the file didn't exist, it would create it. Or you can open it for append. So opening a file for write will put the the pointer, the file pointer right at the beginning of the file, and it will basically wipe out any existing file. Opening it for append will allow you to just add lines of data to the end of the file. And of course, again, like a write, opening a file for append will create the file if it doesn't exist. Okay, so you don't need to use either of these two options. I just wanted to let you know that they exist. Okay. All right, so after we open the file, let me go ahead and put that down here. Now it's important, since I don't have a path specified in the file name, that the file has to be in the same directory that my Python program is in. If you had it in a different directory, a different folder in Windows, then you would need to, you know, have the path specified along with the file name. Okay, so I got through that. That means that the file opened successfully. And then here is the last two lines that are, let's say, new. The first one is the read lines. Oh, I better explain FD. Okay, FD, this is just any old variable name. FD is commonly used because what the open command returns to Python is something called a file descriptor. Every operation involving that file from here on, after we've opened it, we will use the file descriptor instead of the file name. So the only time you use the file name is when you're opening the file. You use the file descriptor, which will be some variable that you assign to the results of the open statement. You'll use the file descriptor for every other operation. So here, fd.readLines. So read lines is a method associated with file descriptors. And it does just what it sounds like. It reads lines of data. Now, what it basically does is it reads the entire contents of the file and puts it into the variable that you specify. So it basically reads the whole file at once, is another way of putting it. Okay, and let's see what type of variable is created with that read. So if we look at type contents, what kind of variable do you think that is? Be your guess.
A list.
A list. Python loves lists, and they're so handy to work with that instead of putting it into, just a string, which would be another option, just putting it into a big long string, it puts it into a list. And so let's look at the what's inside my variable, the contents of my contents variable. And as you see, it is the contents of the file. Let me go back and look at the contents of the file again, in case you forgot what it looks like. It's just a text file with the CSV extension. The extension in this case doesn't really matter. I just gave it the CSV extension because it's a comma separated value file. Excel recognizes the CSV extension. So if you have Excel installed on your computer and you just double click on the file, it'll open in Excel. And if you do it that way, just make sure that, when you go to save it, that it doesn't try to save it as an XLS file. If it does, it'll leave the original CSV alone. But in any case, you can open it in Notepad. You can just right click and say open with, and then select Notepad or whatever you want to use. So this is the contents of the file. Now, this is actually not the best way to look at it, because the previewer gets rid of the commas. So I'll show you what it looks like in Notepad. Okay, so comma separated. Every field is separated by a comma. Okay, so that's what the file looks like. And as you see, when it's read, it pretty much looks like that, except that each line is just an element of our list. So if I say contents of 0, I'll get that first element, which is the header. Okay, this is a common way to create comma separated value files, is to have a header line that explains with some sort of label what each field represents. So first field is the IP address, second field is the port, third field is the name, and the fourth field is the message. And if you see the /n at the end here, the /n is, what does the /n do in Python?
New line.
Yeah, it's a new line. And that's because the file itself, there's a new line character at the end of each line. That's how Notepad knows to put, this on the next line. Oops, this on the next line and this on the next line. Because there's essentially a /n. It's just that it doesn't print a /n, obviously, in Notepad. But the carriage return line feed characters are part of the file. And Python just turns those into /n. Okay, so you see at the end of each, so 0 is the header, and then content sub 1 is the first line after the header. Let's say the second line of the file. Content sub 2 is the third, and so forth. The very last line, in this case, does not have a /n, and that's just because if you look, if you can see my flashing cursor here, after this is Bill's message, and if I try to go down to the next line, it won't let me. That's because I never put pressed enter after this is Bill's message. So there truly is no carriage return line feed or /n at the end of the very last line. It's not a big deal, but in order to treat everything the same, there's something we can do a little bit later when we're processing it. Okay, so this is what the file looks like. Now, the question is, how do we get each of these fields so that we can work with them, so that we can first validate them, and then we can use them to send a message. So let's look at, so here's the part that may not have been obvious to everybody. So what we've got here is, I'm basically going to say, all right, I've got this data in this list, and I know that each element of the list contains all the information I need to send a message. So now what I need to do is I need to get each comma separated value on its own. I need to get them so I can easily get to the port number and the IP address and the name and the message. Okay, so what this line here is doing is basically, this is, what is this called? This process, or this, this line of code, what is that called in Python?
List comprehension.
That's a list comprehension, right? So I'm gonna, before I run that list comprehension, I'm gonna do the same thing using just a non-list comprehension. So what you would normally do if you weren't going to use a list comprehension, you would say for row in contents. Okay, so what this command is going to do, it's going to look at each element of contents, which is that list, and put each element and put the first element into row, and then we're going to do something with that row. And then it's going to, after we do whatever code we have down here, it's going to go up and get the next element in contents and the next element. So this for loop, and we've done these kind of for loops before, this for loop just kind of iterates over all of the elements in the list contents. So what we're going to do is, actually I need to do something first. Oh, I just broke Thawny. It's very sensitive of Thawny to choke on that. My goodness. Can you hear the computer beeping at me too, or do you not hear the beep?
You broke Sandbox and Thawny now.
I like that noise.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice, huh? Let me close it even. Okay. I've never seen that before. So, hopefully Thawny will run again. All right. Recent files. So we're back. I gotta redo this. Actually, oh, by the way, I didn't mention this last fd.close. That, you know, your program would still work without closing the file, but it's always good practice as soon as you're done with the file to close it. And as soon as we've read the contents of the file into our variable, we're done with the file. We don't need it anymore. So that's why I closed it. In a short program that does that, you know, gets out of memory pretty quickly. What's the problem there? Didn't like that. Huh, what the heck? I'll try this again. So did I trash my file too? I've still got it open in Notepad. So there you go. There's a good reason to have the try except. I'm pretty sure that reason that it's yelling at me that it can't open the file is that I have it open already in another application when I was showing you what it looked like in Notepad. So let me try it again and see if it works. Whoops. All right, still not wanting to open. So that's interesting. Huh. That probably means that since Thawny had it open last, I never executed the close. See, and that's another reason why you want to close a file. Since Thawny had it open, and I never did in the last, when I was going through it before, I never did the close, and then Thawny crashed. Well, that file is still open as far as Windows is concerned. And so it's not going to let me open it again. The only thing I might try to do is see if I can copy and paste a new version. Looks like I can. So I'm going to call it test data 2. Make sure it looks good. That it's not somehow. Okay. So yeah, same file. So now, because eventually test data 1 might get closed by the operating system, but it could be a while. And there's some third-party applications that you can use that can go and force close a file. The certain way is to restart your computer, which I don't really want, or at least log off and log back on. Although restarting is more certain to fix it. But I don't want to take the time to do that, obviously. So I'm just going to change the name of it here for our purposes. And let's hope that that was the only problem. Still doesn't like it. Interesting. Huh. So now I'm a little stumped. Let's see what error Python gives. File not found. Well, okay, I know. I bet. No. Process file. Got to make sure that I'm opened the file from the right place.
You probably just retrieved that in 5 minutes, I bet.
Yeah, I could. But I want to figure
By
out.
looking at it.
I got to figure out what the heck's wrong. I wonder if.
What if one of us have it open?
if you had a file open?
No, if we had it open in it's in the same location. If one of us have it open.
Yeah, but it's on my computer, so you could.
Okay, just wondering.
Yeah. So
I'm just kidding, man.
there's somewhere saying it that the file is not. All right, let me do this. Huh. This is weird. I don't know why it would. Did I test data too?
Is it maybe case sensitive?
It's not. I mean, because I've always had the file with the capital T and D. If that, you know, I wouldn't expect that to be an issue. But I'm always worth a try when I can't figure out what the problem is. No such file testdata2.csv. So what is the deal?
Does it search your entire device for that file? Or
No, see, if you look at the top of Thorny and where the directory that I'm in, GT docs, classes, CNT190, Python, all that, since that's where the process file program is located, since I have the test data in the same folder, then that's where it's looking for it, in the same folder. So I'm not sure why it's suddenly giving me an issue here. I bet being open before wasn't a problem. But something's got screwed up somewhere along the line. You know what? No.
You could try closing and completely out Sani.
Yeah, I know, except that it did get closed.
Oh, I didn't see that. Sorry.
Is there something you can type in there to see what
IT
file it-
crowd? Have you tried turning it on and off again?
see what folder it is opening?
Try going to the task manager and checking details, making sure that it's completely closed.
Yeah. Let's see, under details. See, make sure that Thorny isn't alive in there somewhere. So all these, okay. A lot of crap open. Yeah, Thorny's not there.
That was worth a try.
Yeah, no, I know it was. So what else could be going on here? Let me.
If you maybe put an asterisk in there and just see what file it is trying to read, or what folder. You know what I mean?
What I could do is I could put the whole path.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Put the whole path in.
And you know why that should make, since it's been working all this time. But let's see. Since I don't know what is wrong, might as well try things that seem like it's worth a try.
Maybe it doesn't have permission.
It won't. It needs double backslashes, because remember the backslash character is the escape character in Python. So if you, when you have a path, you need double backslashes. At least I'm pretty sure that's what that particular error is, because it wasn't the file not found was invalid argument. Okay, so that worked. I'd be really curious as to know what it was trying to open and what path it was using. So, okay, I'll see if I'll worry about that some other time. So we got it open. Let's read it again. And just to remind you what it looks like. Content. And then here's where we were before. Okay. And the reason I backtracked is because I have to create a empty data list first. So this is doing this one command here, the list comprehension. I'm going to replace that list comprehension with, let's say, the long way of doing it. So first you have to create an empty list. Then we're going to say for row in contents. We're going to cycle through each element of the list. And we're going to say data list append, and we're going to say row. So now doing that is going to just create a list of basically just a list of each row. So it's really not going to change very much. So what we really want to do is we want to split that row by the comma. And what that's going to do, that's going to create a new list with each element that's separated by a comma as the new elements of that brand new list. All right, so this is going to take each row and split it by the comma. So the first row, the first, let's say, line or item of the contents list is IP, comma, port, comma, name, comma. So what this command is going to do, it's going to create a new list with IP address as the first element, port as the second element, name is the third, and message is the fourth, without all the commas in between, obviously. And then the next time through the for loop, it'll create a new list called, create a new list with IP address is the first element, the port is the second, the name is the third, and the message is the fourth. All right, and let's see, let me just, do we want to do anything with this now? No, I think we'll just, okay, so now let's look at data list. Okay, so now you see we have the big list, data list, that was originally created here, and then new lists were essentially added each time through the for loop. And the first element of data list is this list. The second element of data list is the next list, and so forth. Okay, so now we have a list with four lists inside of it. Okay, so now that we've got each of the items, the IP address, the port, the name, and the message all broken up into individual elements of the list, now we can go and process that. So the first thing we want to do is we don't need that header list, or that we don't need this, right? Because that doesn't have an IP address and port number. Those are just labels, and we can get rid of that. So we're going to delete the first element of data list. I mean, you could do this differently in the next loop that we see. You could just skip over the 0th element, but I think it it makes it a little tidier if you actually delete that header. Okay, now data list is just the data that we want. So it consists of 3 lists, and each list has an IP address, a port, a name, and a message. All right, now what we have to do is we have to process each of these lists. Okay, and that's where this for loop comes in. And I just reuse the variable row. So for row and data list is basically going to say, now go through each element of data list, and each element is a list. Okay, so that's going to be the first element of data list, or the 0th element. Let me just demonstrate that for sure. So data list sub 0, data list sub 1. Okay, you get the idea. All right, so for row in data list. So we're going to process each of those lists. And there's a nice feature in Python where you can essentially, some people call it unpacking. You can unpack the elements of a list and put each element into its own variable just by using this syntax here. Okay, so every time through the for loop, the variable row is going to have an entire list in it, and I'm just going to unpack that into those 4 variables. Okay, that's easier than saying row sub 0 or IP address equal row sub 0, port equal row sub 1, name equal row sub 2, and so forth. This is really just a shorthand way of doing exactly that, saying IP address equal row sub 0, port equal row sub 1, and so forth. So that's a nice way of unpacking a list into several variables. All right. And then remember I said that we've got this /n hanging out at the end of the first 2 messages, but not the last one. And that means, you know, when we process the messages, either we're going to have an extra carriage return line feed, or we're going to have too few carriage return line feeds. So what I decided to do is to make all the lines the same, just get rid of that carriage return line feed by doing a replace. Okay, so that replaces the /n with just a null, basically. That's not a space in between there. That's just a quote, quote, which means a null or no character. All right. So here, now that you've got your IP address and port, you know, and I went ahead and replaced the /n. This could be done later, or you could even not do it and it'll probably still work out okay. But what you do have to do, this would be the time where you would validate that IP address and that port number. Okay, so it's just going to be a simple validation. If the validation fails, meaning the IP address is not a class A, B, or C, or it's got some non-numeric values in it, then you just basically skip this. You would do like a continue and process the next row of data. So you don't have to, you know, do a while loop inside of here and keep getting the IP address, because you're not getting it from anywhere except the file. So you'll just basically throw the line away if the IP address or the port number is invalid in some way. All right, and then, so validation goes here. And then, you know, if it's not valid, you do a continue, or you do something, whatever, however you want to do it. And make sure that if it is valid, then you would increase the counter because you need to keep track of how many valid lines of the file that you processed. And then you basically do what you did in 6C. You create a tuple that consists of the IP address and the integer. Make sure you use the integer version of the port number, which you may have converted when you validate it. But if you didn't convert it, then you need to convert it within your tuple. All right, so that will create your tuple that consists of the address and the port. And then you would do your UDP sends. Now, I don't have them in my sample program. I'm just going to print out everything. Right, and so that's what you would be, you know, if you were printing it, that's what it would look like. And what I've got here, if this looks unfamiliar to you, I just wanted to show you that there's other ways to format a print statement. And this is uses a character, a special character in front of the quote. And the F just means formatted. So Python knows that what's inside this quote, it's supposed to look for formatting. And wherever it sees a left curly brace and a variable and a right curly brace, it just, in the print statement, it takes the contents of that variable and prints that, okay? And I told it, you know, I'm having it print single quotes as well. You don't, I wouldn't necessarily need to do that. I just told it to print single quotes as well. So this is another way to format a string rather than using a bunch of concatenation and stuff like that. This is, and a lot of people think this is a little bit cleaner way to do a formatted print statement. And there's other methods as well besides the F method. But there's, this is a pretty commonly used one. All right, so so what you would have here in your actual 6D program is you would have, since you're going to be, with each send, you're going to send the name and the message. So you need to, let's see, where do I have that assignment? I think I kind of give you the format of what it's supposed to look like. Okay, so what you're going to be sending is the name, a colon, and then the message. So you just need to take that name and concatenate it with the colon and the message. And do a single send. Now I'm going to show you a version of this that does the whole ball of wax. I'll just run it. Now this doesn't do any of the validation, and it's got it hard coded. We'll see if it gives me an error here, if this program also errors out on test data. I'm kind of interested to see. Okay, so this actually went and sent the messages. Now, in this case, it sent the name as a separate message and the message is a separate message. But just to show you that that actually worked, I'll pull up the virtual machine that is grabbing all that stuff. And here she is. So those are that's the message I just sent. Received message from Ann, received message from Bill, and then received a message from Greg, Ann, and Bill.
Is this going to be live streaming again?
Yep, just like it'll be just like what you see here.
Okay, thanks.
Try not to do any infinite loops with the send. And basically, it shouldn't be shouldn't be too hard not to do an infinite loop, because whoops, where is my phony program? If you do a for loop, the for loop will end when there's no more data in data list. Okay, when it comes to the end of the data, then your for loop will end, and you can just print an all done message if you want, or whatever. Well, actually, you need to print how many lines were processed successfully, how many lines from the data file were processed successfully. So that's what you need to print at the end. You don't need to send that, just print it in your program. So yeah, if you construct things like this, then there shouldn't be any infinite loops that I mean, the program didn't crash when Steven sent me 10,000 messages. But other people, just out of coincidence, were trying their program at the same time, and they weren't seeing anything because the program was really backed up trying to process everything that Steven was sending to it. It eventually processed everything because the log file was enormous. I mean, the log file was absolutely huge. I'll show you what that log file looked like. So this is, when I was first testing it, and then Nick and Chris, and then Cody, and then Matthew, and Joshua, and then Matthew did something with he got in a loop too, obviously. So it wasn't just Steven. I mean, I'm scrolling as fast as I can scroll, and we still have Matthew's messages. So, I don't know how long I have to scroll to get past. There we go. Finally, there we go. And then some more from Joshua, and then some more from Matthew. So Joshua got a few in there in between all of Matthew's. And yeah, more Matthew. Then Connor snuck one in, a couple. And then Steve. And Steve's like the rest of the file. Yep, you're the rest of the file, Steve. So anyway, I created a new file so that the next time I have much less to go through. And I also added the date and time display. So tell me what time of the day you guys are working on this stuff, if it's in the middle of the night or whatever. So, all right. Any questions on all that? Okay, no? Yes, were you gonna, anybody gonna?
Yeah, without putting our names on the input, how do you know that we're the ones sending it?
I don't.
Okay.
That's why you're supposed to put your name.
Oh, so you want us to change the original file?
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Yes. Now, when you change the original file, I'm going to tell you something. And if you start looking at, the contents of your, what you read from the file, something strange may happen. Depends on how you have Notepad set up. Let me see. That's assuming you use Notepad, which you may not. Just don't use like a word processor. Okay, it's got to be a text editor. If you use Word, well, you can save Word as a text file, and that's what you'd have to do. It definitely won't process a Word file properly. But if you look at Notepad, if I save this as, if you happen to, and sometimes it depends on the source file, if you happen to have it Notepad configured to save UTF-8 with BOM, which is sometimes, that's how my file was coming up. And if you guys downloaded the test data file before today, then you may have these funky characters. I'm going to just show you what those funky characters look like. So let me go and process the file again. It's not going to hurt anything because the funky characters are only in the very first line, but nonetheless, you might worry about it. Watch it not do it for us now. Okay, so you see these three little characters here? Those are UTF-8 beginning. I forget exactly what the BOM stands for again, but it's basically a code that some editors want or need in order to know how the text is encoded inside the file. And so if you are playing around with your file and you see that, it's not something to worry about, because you're going to be deleting this anyway. You're going to be deleting the header line anyway, and it doesn't affect the rest of the file. But I just wanted you to be aware of it, that it might show up on you depending on how Notepad is configured and what the original file is. If you use a version of the original file from earlier than today, then it's going to have those funky characters. And I went and used a binary to hex editor to get rid of those characters and recreate the file. Okay, so any questions about the assignment or any of the commands needed here? In your program, you should not have to do this. I don't know why whatever happened, filed things up, and it was trying to read the file from somewhere else instead of where it should have, which is the default folder that the Python file is in. But in the event you get an error trying to open it, and you've got you're typing in the file name correctly and everything, you may have to append the full path. You shouldn't have to, as long as I've never had to do it until just now when we were going over it and when Thawny crashed. So most likely it won't be an issue for you. All right, so anything else? Make sure you do the close. And again, that could have been the reason why things were messed up. But I think that's all you need. Everything else you've done before in one way or another. So
Thanks for going through all those steps.
sure. Okay. Let's look at does anybody need to go over anything from last week? Any of the Python content curriculum or the threaded assignment, if you've got questions on that?
I was trying to make the lab ask for an input instead of, just checking it against the data.
Yeah.
But couldn't figure that out.
Oh, really? All you needed to do is here. Let me bring my versions of that program up if I can find it. That was a lab, right?
Yes.
So actually I did. I did it with an input. So this is what I did. Just year equals input, and then I just put a strip that, that's not necessary. That just strips any, if anyone put a space or whatever after the year. And then I checked for the validity of the year, which I don't think that all this was required in your program. I don't know why I did it. I probably did it as an example for the class last year. And then, making sure that they entered something and that they didn't enter 0. And then I call is your leap with the integer of the year. You have to make sure that you cast it to an integer, because remember, with the input, it's going to come into the year variable as a string. And so you've got to make sure you cast it. So I just put the whole, yours was probably just this part. And then you had the function definition up here that returned true or false. So all you had to do is encase this right here in a while loop and get the year as an input. See what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm trying to open up mine to see what I did, but it's not working right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, if you get it open, and you have another question to ask, just speak up. So, everyone that turned this in, as far as I can remember, did either this version or this version. I don't know if anyone did the, negative and return false. Maybe somebody did, but there's basically 3 ways, at least 3 ways. These are the 3 ways that I came up with as an example, and in most, and actually you didn't. Well, you don't. You may or may not have needed the parentheses. It depended on where you had your ands and your ors. But I always, in any compound if statement, when there's more than one and or, I like to use parentheses. It makes it easier to read. Even when they're not necessary, it tends to make it easier to read. But anyway, those are the 3 ways, at least that I came up with, that you could have done the problem with a single if and then an else to return the opposite of the true or the false. Okay, any other questions from last week? Okay. Real quick, just to let you know what's coming, we're pretty much done with Python after this. And let me see if I have any kind of review for the 4th one, for the 4th module 4 exam. I don't think I do. Has anyone taken the module 4 exam yet? Final. I don't think I do have something for that. Let's see if there's. See if I can go over. Does anybody want to do any kind of review on module 4 exam before you actually do it? Is that going to be useful for anybody here? Okay, well, how about this? if anybody that's here doesn't have any questions, doesn't want to do, doesn't need to do a review of module 4, you can go ahead and, you're free to go, and we'll see you next week. Anybody that wants to stay and either review module 4 or has any other questions, just stay, and I'll see if anybody stays before I go any further.
Thank you.
Sounds good. Have a good night.
All right, you too. So I don't know if I've ever even gone through this module 4 test, but I'm gonna go through just to, mostly I'm gonna let you know what kind of problems are in there, so you have some idea of what to put most of your efforts into studying. So I've got the test open in another on another window. So, and what I'll do is, if there's something that I can, put in Thorny console to demonstrate, and I will. Otherwise, I might just, say, make sure you understand this, that, or the other. Okay, so one of the first things is a recursive. Of course, that's the first question I got. I think that the questions are randomized. So recursive functions, you basically just have to be able to trace through it. And the first one, that they show you is basically a function where, well, it's basic. I think we actually went over this. This might have been the recursive example. Let me see if I can open that up. Yeah, it's exactly this. Okay, this is by accident that the example that I came up with to trace through with you guys is except for the names of the function and the variable, it's exact. So we went through that, and so hopefully you should be able to know what it does, right? It's basically, you send it a number and it's going to add up that number and every number less than it down to 0. So with the number 3, it's going to add up 3 plus 2 plus 1, and that's what it's going to return. So that's going to be one of your questions. So you should get at least one right then on module 4.
Right.
They're even using the same test data that I used. So, okay. And then a question, making sure you understand the idea of scope, and that a variable that is defined in the a variable that's defined in the main body of the program is a global variable and available to all functions, and variables that are defined in the function is only available to that function. Okay, so the question here is, what is going to print out?
Error. Yeah, missing a parenthesis up there.
Yes, an error would print out. Actually,
Here.
too many parentheses.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, okay. So, yeah, so that's the question is what's going to print out?
The one, right?
Well, there's two print statements in the, so var equals, so it sets a variable to 1. It calls the function. The function prints var plus 1. So what's that going to print?
Okay, 2.
And then it prints.
One, yeah, so it's one line 2 and then one line 1, right?
So yeah, because it says end equal and that's just, double quote, right? It means it's not gonna, no characters being printed. And so there's no end of line being printed in this print statement. So this is just gonna print a 2 and then the next print will print a 1 with the carriage return. So it should print a 2 and a 1 is my guess. I've got to save it somewhere. Yeah. Okay. So, little, things that this should be fairly easy to follow on the test, an example like this. What else? So obviously, so far, the first 3 questions I'm seeing out of 20 are function related. So the next one relates to the named variables. So when you've got X or named variables and default. And if I do oops, I didn't mean to do that. Why? Okay, so something like that, you've got to realize that X is defaulted to 1. Sorry. So X is defaulted to 1. We're sending Y to be 3. So it's going to return 1 times 3. And so this should print out the value 3.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so you see that?
Yeah.
Next is some list processing with functions. So I'm not really going to try to do an example here because there's kind of too much to try to whip out real quick. But the main thing that you need to know is about how lists are handled differently when they are sent to functions. Remember, since lists can be altered in place, if you send to a function as an argument a list, then it will, if that function changes that list in some way by sorting it or deleting an element or something like that, then it gets also, that same change occurs in the original list from the caller. I should probably at least give you an idea what I'm talking about.
That makes sense to me, but let's see it.
And if I did something like it doesn't matter. So the idea here, and this won't run. I can't run this because I'd have to create the list in the first place and put something in it. But the idea here is that this change is also affects a list down here.
Or if you like deleted an element, like
Sorry. Yeah, no, that's right. Or if you delete it, like delete a list sub 1, okay, that also, you know, that deletes an element of the list, changes it in place, which means it also affects the list in the main, it's defined in the main program.
yeah, so if you defined it down there, and okay. But that doesn't happen with other like tuples or well,
Right.
Okay.
Right, because you can't change a tuple in place. So in order to change a tuple, you would have to recreate a new tuple in the function, and that recreates a totally new variable. So it wouldn't have any effect on the original variable being set to the function. So that's the one special difference about lists, is that they are mutable, meaning they can be changed in place. And so a change that occurs to the exact same name in the function affects the variable in the main body of the program.
Everything else only exists within that function, right? Right.
Right. Yeah. If I defined a variable like, you know, y equals 10, y is only available to this function. It's not available outside of it. Okay. Like I couldn't say print y. After calling it, y doesn't exist from the main body of the program's point of view. All right. And here's something that here's another question. Can you have a function name the same as the variable name? I don't think you can.
I think I remember seeing it said
That'll throw an error. So let's get rid of that. Yeah, so function object is not spoken. So this is something that we probably didn't talk about much, but well, I think we talked about it when we were talking about variables, that function names are, you know, once you create a function and you give it a name, you can't use that name anywhere else. You can't use it like I tried to, for example, as a variable. Okay, tried to use it as a variable here. So just know that you can't have a function name the same as a variable name. And then you know how to define functions. You know, def keyword, the name, and then open parenthesis, close parenthesis, and then possibly arguments. But arguments are not required, obviously. Okay, so yeah, a good chunk of this test is on functions. So you know, go over functions, make sure you understand the idea of the both, you know, using default parameters, using named parameters, and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And let me see what else. Tuples. You know, make sure you know that you can't change a tuple in place. So if I have a tuple here, that's not going to work. Okay, you can't change it in place. In order to do that, you would actually have to create a brand new tuple. You'd have to basically go 3, 2, yeah. So that's a big difference. The biggest difference between tuples and lists is that they're immutable.
Immutable, you can't change. Mutable, you can.
All right, then the idea that tuples are sequences, and this was probably buried in the curriculum somewhere, but I don't think we really use the terminology that tuples are sequences. But basically, a sequence means that they can be indexed. Like saying my tup sub 0 and referencing it, that's okay. So a variable that is a sequence means that you can reference individual elements of that variable and also use slices. So, I can say, something like that. And now x equals 3 and 2. Okay, so indexing that's an indexing and that's slicing. And that's what
Okay, so
that's what being a sequence means. Okay, and then there's some questions on dictionaries. Just remember, the idea of dictionaries, that the first part of a dictionary item is the key and the second part is the value. And if you want to display the value, you just give the dictionary variable the key. So saying dict and 1. Okay, so in this case, that is not a index like it is with a list or a tuple. That, in this case, that is the key, and it produces the value. So if I say dict 2, obviously, oops. Oops. Oh, what did I do? Okay. Yeah, more function stuff. Make sure, some stuff hopefully you haven't forgotten, like what the mod operator does. The mod operator returns the remainder after a division operation.
The what operator?
The mod operator. So 5 mod 2, that's the percentage sign. Okay. So what?
Oh, I thought you said mud.
Mod. Modulus. Sorry, modulus is the full name. So 5 mod 2 is going to return what value?
1.
1.
1, the remainder.
Because 2 goes into 5 2 times, remainder 1, and it's always the remainder that it returns. Yeah, lots of function stuff. I don't think there's anything, take your time with this. There's 20 questions. Well, it can't take too much time because they time you. But make sure you go over and are comfortable with how functions work and calling functions and stuff before you jump onto this test, because a good portion of the test is based on your understanding of how functions work. None of the functions are very difficult what they're doing. It's really just making sure you understand how parameters work and stuff like that. Okay, and just understand what the none value means. The none value is what for example, what a function returns when there's no return statement. So print, for example, if I print printed none because what that inner print statement returned was the value none, because print functions don't return anything. So when a function doesn't return anything, they technically do because they return the value none. Okay, what else about none? Can you assign none to variables? And when no offhand, and I say a equal none.
Yes.
Apparently so. It would give me an error if not. So you can assign it to variables. You can't use it with, you can't say
Not equals
2
0.
plus none. You can't do that because none is not a numeric type. So
None is not 0.
can you say, since I said A equals none and I say B equals none, can you say A equal B? None equals none, yeah. So you can compare them and you can assign them to variables. That's probably something that would be hard to, I would have had to have thought about that question a little bit because we just don't work with none very often.
Mhm.
So
They say here that where they did this thing where they put print strange function and they prints none. It says it doesn't cause an error, but it's bad programming.
yeah, generally you shouldn't print something that prints none.
No.
Because it's not giving any information. I mean, there might be some reason to do that, legitimately in a program. I can't think of a reason offhand, but
Because it doesn't mean 0, and it just means a lack of data.
Yeah, that's empty. It means that the variable A exists, but I wonder if I can say A equal. I can't do this. Okay, that's again trying to do arithmetic with none.
Right.
A equals none. So there's not a lot of. I guess the only thing would be if you had a function that either returned a legitimate value or none, then you might want to compare what a function returned with the value none to see if that's what it returned. That's about the only thing I can think of. If you had some function that you needed to write that either returned something or it didn't, and you need to find out if one or the other.
And you can't use that for validating user input, like if they didn't enter anything.
No, because when someone just hits enter at an input statement, it's not none, it's actually the double quote character.
Okay. I mean, I've used that before, but I was just wondering, well, I've never thought about using none, but that's not what it means. There's very few instances I can see that can be used.
Yeah. So if I just hit enter, see how X equals quote quote?
Yeah.
Instead of none, because it's literally just, it's a string. X is still a string. It's just a string that has basically a null character in it.
What type is, so if you went type B, what does that come back as?
Good question. Probably type none, I think. Yeah, none type. There's an actual type called none. None type.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay, so.
Hey, it only, that's weird.
Also, again, with functions, remember what the global keyword does. The global keyword, if you use it in a function like this, okay, now I can actually, let me see. To rearrange everything that I did here. Okay, so calls function, y is set. All right, so the global keyword makes y available to the rest of the world. So without the global keyword for y, my program is going to blow up, right? Y is not defined. So that's what global does. It makes it available to the rest of the world. Okay, some more on tuples, basically understanding, that you can do slices with tuples. And if you want to change a tuple, you reassign it. So just real quick, is that valid, do you think? And if so, what is tup going to look like?
Yeah, it's just reassigning it to 1.
Yeah. Tup is a new tuple being, well, I mean, just the value 1, not a new tuple is being created, but the value 1 is taken from tuple and put into a new variable called tup, because now my old tup is dead, is gone. The tup that was a tuple is now just an integer. So, if I say type tup now, it's an integer. So, strange. So yeah, just remember that when you reuse the name, the variable name, you are recreating that variable. When it's to the left of the equal sign, let's say. Okay, almost done. A little bit more on dictionaries. Make sure that you understand not only how dictionaries work, but the methods, the keys method, and the items method, and the values method. So, just go over those real quick before you take the test, if you don't remember what they mean. Remember, the keys method is going to return one by one the keys, all the key values in a dictionary. So if you use them in iteration, like you said, for x in dict.keys, okay, then the first key in dictionary would be assigned to x in this for loop. Then the second item in the second key in dict would be returned to x, and so forth, until you went through all the keys in the dictionary. And if I said for x in dict items, saying not items returns the entire item, which is the key colon value. And if I said dict.values, it would just return each of the values in order from the dictionary. And then we also talked about you could sort any type of iterable variable. You can use the sorted function, and that will sort either alphabetically or numerically, depending on what the type of item is contained in there. All right, and last one. Yeah, you know what? Just the definition of a built-in function means that you don't have to use the import statement, basically. Any function that requires you to do, like the UDP stuff, we had to import the socket library to create the socket and do the UDP calls. But anything else like print, len, sorted that we just looked at, even all the file functions like the open function, those are all built-in functions because we didn't have to import something first. And boy, since I actually only clicked on one of the answers, it just kicked me out because we went through the whole test. Well, the time expired, and I got 5%. I got 1 out of 20.
Very good.
I wasn't clicking on the answers. All right, so that should take care of the review for module 4. Any other questions before we go?
When are you going to post this? Or are you going to have that the send message available to look at in any way, shape, or form?
What's that?
Are you going to have that available to look over, or
hopefully
only
with
when this...
good notes?
I took some, but not
you'll
everything.
Have the recording to go through.
Okay.
To see it.
Okay. That's all I need.
Yeah, I don't want to make it that, because then it would be a matter of copy and paste.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you have to copy and paste it to the right place, but so
Okay.
yeah, if you weren't taking notes, then look back at the recording. I'm probably going to stay tonight to try to get it posted up into Canvas, so it's there by tomorrow morning for you.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else?
That's it.
All right.
Just wondering if you can go over the my assignment I turned in.
What was that?
The lab 4.3.1.6.
Oh, okay. Did you find it?
Yeah. Somehow I skipped the first paragraph, so I was trying on my own thinking, oh, I'll try to see if I can make this as a input, just not realizing that that's what you actually wanted.
I'm not sure if that is. I don't think that was a requirement, was it?
Yeah, it was. Yeah,
Oh.
it's like the first line and I skipped it.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. All right. So I did want you to. Yeah, I did want to get. That's right. I remember that now. So do you have? Do you have it? That you want to put it up on the screen, or do you want? How do you want to do it? Josh. Hello.
Oh yeah, have to unmute it.
Yeah. Do you want to?
Sorry. Yeah, I was gonna. I can share, but it won't let me share while you're sharing.
Yeah, I just unshared.
Okay. There we go. So this is the one I turned in, but that was, doing the test data. And so I tried doing it as an input.
Okay. And did the assignment require, let me go back and look at the assignment to see.
It says get the year as input from the user instead of using the test data supplied in the lab. You should keep getting the input from the user until the user gives no input or enter 0.
Oh, okay.
And then for whatever reason, all I read was use one if statement,
Okay. Well, okay.
which I think I got this correct because it worked for this one.
Okay.
But as far as getting the input from the user.
Okay. So what you basically want to do then is take your data. Let's see. Can I interact with your? I'm going to request remote control.
Oh, there we go.
Okay. All right. So basically, you want to. Here's your while loop that checks to see if it's a leap year. So all you want to really do is take this. I'm not sure what this is doing here. Test result. Let's just see. If you take this and put it inside, and then so year equal data. So
yeah, I don't remember why I did the test results.
So you want to
true.
convert that to an integer. Oops. And then though, before you do that, you just want to validate the data. So what I would do is just something like if data dot strip. Well, you don't even have to do that. You could just say if data equal or data equal. Because remember, it's a string when you get it from the user. So you just want to do if it's empty or it's 0, then you want to just break out of the program. Yeah. Or break or quit. Since there's no more code after the while loop, then you could just do an exit, or I would probably break.
Okay.
Just do a break, and that'd be it. So, and then you take your year and you convert it to the data to an integer, and then you print it, and the result is your leap year. And as long as that's yeah, what you could make this a lot simpler by just saying, instead of doing this, since is year leap returns true or false, you can just say if is year leap year, in other words, this
equals true.
You don't even have to say equals true, because remember, an if statement is looking for true or false. And since is your leap returns true or false, then that's all you have to do. If is your leap.
Oh.
See what I'm saying? Because is your leap will return, if it returns true, meaning it's a leap year, then this will get executed. If it returns false, then the else will get executed.
Okay.
See what I'm saying? So the tendency is to want to compare it to true, and that's fine if you do that. It's just not necessary, because you can use the result of a function if that function returns true or false. If it didn't return true or false, then you'd have to say, is it equal to something else? But yeah, so that makes it, and then you want to change that print statement to say what what is okay. You want to say it's a leap year.
Yeah.
And else say it's a common year or something like that.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that should do
I
it.
tended to do that. I type more than I need to.
And
A lot.
that's real common when you're first starting to program. You get lots of extra code. I even still do it. I go back and look at programs I wrote a year or so ago and say, wow, I've learned a lot since then. or sometimes when you're first writing a program and you're just thinking about the logic, you end up doing more. And then when you look at it later, you're like, that can just be condensed down to, a little bit less. So, and I would get rid of that line that I've got highlighted there because it's not doing anything.
Okay.
All right. Yeah,
Well,
make sure you do, make sure you put your break statement there, after this if statement, and you should be good.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Okie doke.
I think that's all I had.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll see you next week then.
Okay. Thanks very much.
All righty. Bye.
Bye.